Hi, I'm Lindsey Smith, welcoming you to Raise the Line with Osmosis from Elsevier, an ongoing exploration about how to improve health and healthcare. As many people on this program have said before, combating health misinformation is the biggest challenge of our time. That may be even more relevant today as recent leadership changes have sparked conversations about the direction and consistency of public health guidance about vaccines and other public health measures. Our guest today, Dr. Jess Steier, is on the front lines of this struggle as a public health scientist and science communicator seeking to bridge divides and foster trust through empathetic, evidence based communication. Dr. Steier has several platforms from which to do this work, including as a founder and host of Unbiased Science, a communication hub that uses multiple channels to share validated health and science information, and as an executive director of the Science Literacy Lab, a nonprofit organization dedicated to reaching a diverse audience seeking clarity and reliable information on scientific topics. I'm looking forward to learning more about the many ways she is working to encourage dialogue and make complex scientific concepts accessible. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Steier.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, we'd like to start today by learning more about you and your background and career journey. I understand that you've pursued a couple of different career interests before kind of settling into your work as a public health expert. Can you tell us about that?
Oh gosh, yes, my trajectory was pretty bumpy. It was definitely not a straight line. I knew that I always gravitated towards, sounds so cliche, but helping people, right? So, and healthcare was a natural place for me to land because my father, I watched him battle emphysema for many years, took him to the doctor, saw him interface with the healthcare system. So health was always in the back of my mind. But I gotta tell you, I did not love the biology courses, the chemistry courses. That's not, I don't know, it didn't capture my attention. It wasn't really, it was clear to me that was not my strong suit. But I loved math and statistics and calculus and anything to do with numbers and calculations and odds and all that stuff. And so I learned about this field, public health, which allowed me to combine my love of math and statistics and healthcare. And it was just a dream come true. And one more just random personal aside, and really I could talk about this for a long time, but my father was actually a professional gambler. And so I would go with him to the casino, to the racetrack, and it was all about predicting odds and outcomes, right? And so that's really what I'm kind of doing in public health. That's what I was trained to do as a public health scientist, as an evaluation scientist, was to like calculate the odds of an outcome. So for a lot of reasons, this has just been the perfect field for me.
Quite the journey, and it sounds like it kind of blended so many different aspects of your experience along the way.
Yeah, fun fact, one more fun fact, if I could just say one more thing, is
Yeah.
I considered law school. I actually took my LSAT, applied to law school, got into law school when I thought, oh, should I do health law? But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That didn't really play on my whole math love. And then I took a whole summer course on the MCAT thinking I was going to apply to med school and decided against that as well. So needless to say, yeah, I considered a lot of different things, but very happy where I landed.
So, when did you first engage with science communication, and what do you like most about this field?
Oh my gosh. So I alluded to the fact that really my training is not at all in communications. I never took any formal course in comms or anything like that. My training was more in public health science, right? But then early in the pandemic, people were starting to piece together, hey, this person has some expertise in this field of public health, something about epidemiology, right? And so people would come to me saying, science by headline, what's going on? How scared should I be? What should I do to prep, and how can I keep my family safe? And I started just putting out on my personal Facebook page pointers or summaries of what I was seeing in the science and as things were developing. And I make the joke always, I thought I would just be my mom and her friends following along, but I started getting requests from people who I didn't know, and I was like, hold on a second, I have some personal stuff, I have pictures of my kids, like I got to do something about this. And that's when I launched Unbiased Science, and it became its own thing. and has totally taken on a life of its own these past 5 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's always good to have your mom and her friends start off, but now you have such a following. And you mentioned unbiased science there. Can you tell us about unbiased science and the various types of content that you guys make?
Yes. So it started off really as a podcast, and I still have the podcast. It comes out every week, every Wednesday. Please tune in. But really realized very quickly that different people learn and absorb information in different ways. And happy to talk more about this, but it also aligns with things like demographics and political affiliation. And I wanted to reach the broadest audience possible. So in addition to the podcast, we also put out infographics and data visualizations via social media. That really blew up on Instagram, which is where we have our largest following. Then we have long form content that we do on Substack and on Medium that tends to reach, actually, interestingly, an older audience, a more politically conservative audience. It's just people like to learn in different ways. And so, we're putting it all out there in different modalities, trying to meet people where they are.
And I highly encourage everyone to check out the podcast. I've had a listen to it, and I know that you guys are tackling health science myths and breaking down complex topics in a way that's really clear and engaging to everyone. So we'll be sure to pass that information along in the show notes for everyone to tune into that. But I want to come back to disinformation a little bit. What methods do you use to validate information in general?
That's a very good question, and the answer is it's changed over time, just candidly, and not to get, political, but there is a lot of upheaval in the public health system at the federal level right now. And so whereas I used to use those sources, CDC, and a major shout out to the scientists who are at the CDC continuing to do amazing work, but I've really started shifting more toward medical consensus, scientific consensus, looking at professional organizations like the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, other large scientific and medical organizations. Because yeah, I think it's apparent to all of us now that you can have an MD, you could have a PhD or credentials, and it doesn't mean that we're all aligned. We're not all saying the same thing, right? And there are bad players in every single field, in and out of scientific disciplines, right? And so instead, I always look to consensus, and that's what I often use to validate sources, and always turning to peer-reviewed literature when possible. If I can, I'm sorry if I'm getting rambly here, but I think the pandemic kind of changed everything, and people who don't have scientific backgrounds have become aware of things like PubMed. And I think sometimes folks think that, oh, if I could find an article on PubMed, it has to be credible, it has to be valid, without realizing that it's a repository of all studies, and not all studies are created equal, and there's totally different types of evidence and quality of evidence. So I just want to give that little shout that, there are different types of studies and not all can be extrapolated to the larger population. And so I try to do my best to translate that and to make sense of all the information that's being hurled at us, right? To make sense of the noise.
Those are really good points, and it makes a lot of sense about everything changing after COVID. So I appreciate you sharing your process there. I think it's helpful for everyone to hear the different ways people are approaching validating information. So I want to talk a little bit about vaccines here. We've had a kind of persistent wave of misinformation around vaccines and in healthcare in general. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence disproving these ideas, they continue to circulate and even gain some traction. Why do you think these myths continue, and what can we do differently, whether we're in public health or education or communication, to more effectively counter them?
So, I mean, this is something I talk a lot about, and I really could talk for hours and hours about this one topic. So I have a lot of conversations with people who are self-proclaimed vaccine skeptics. And I do want to just give a little shout that some of us in the science communication community, we actually hesitate to use terms like misinformation and disinformation because, sometimes it's not even bad information. It's just people getting overwhelmed with information and maybe not having proper context, all that stuff. But anyway, so we've had a lot of these conversations with people, and COVID comes up. I know we just started talking about this a little bit, but it comes up time and time again. The handling of the pandemic, the messaging, around masking and vaccines. And that sowed a lot of distrust in capital S science and the medical establishment. And then it was like a perfect storm, a lot of different things lined up, and you have this growth of the Maha movement, which is really all about this, yeah, appeal to nature, and natural is better, and we have these bodies and these immune systems. Why do we need something artificial, this big pharma for-profit machine pumping us full of things to make money? It was like a bunch of different messages aligned, and I think that, again, it was a perfect storm, and it's caused so much distrust. And yeah, happy to talk more about it, but I hope that that makes some sense. That's the big picture of what I think I see happening.
I think that's a really insightful take there. I want to switch our attention to talking about the Science Literacy Lab. Tell us what it is and what you guys are doing to help kind of combat that conflicting health information out there.
Yes, so Science Literacy Lab it's my baby. It's our nonprofit organization. So we have a DBA, so we do business as the Center for Unbiased Science and Health. But yes, it's the Science Literacy Lab, and it's basically the machine behind what people see, right? It's developing these campaigns to help people, like I said, tease out fact from fiction. And so we do these really cool things. One of the things we're working on through the nonprofit is these virtual escape rooms. So putting different people in scenarios. So let's say you're a pediatrician, right? And you have a lot of different patients, or parents of patients, who I should say, who perhaps are hesitant to get a vaccine for their child for various different reasons. So this mom is a crunchy mom who doesn't believe that kids need something external, right? Or has a concern about vaccine technology or ingredients or more libertarian leanings or whatever it might be. And so we put people in these different scenarios, and we're not just giving them the science, because that's just, I would say that's less than half the battle. It's about how to communicate with compassion and with empathy. And so we do this. I use the example of pediatricians, but we've done this for other groups like pharmacists and farm techs, and also just the general public. When you're sitting around the holiday table and you hear your uncle say something like, oh, well, those COVID vaccines change your DNA. Just giving people the science of, well, that's not possible because it doesn't enter the nucleus. Like, that's not something that a person is going to be able to communicate. So instead, we help them. Okay, well, when you hear this, maybe take a pause. Let's think about what this person might have heard that's making them believe this. And here's how you might approach that conversation. So it's more about how to communicate around, scientific falsehoods and misconceptions.
I think that's so important. And you guys are clearly finding creative ways to open things up. I love the idea of the escape room. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys are leveraging data and storytelling in your work together?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot in the past 5 years, and the number one thing is that humans trust humans, right? And so my most powerful content is when I lead with my human voice. I'm not just a public health scientist robot. I'm a mom. I have the same concerns. My mama bear instinct is to do anything to keep my kids safe. So I'll lead with that. And that has proven to be really powerful, powerful and effective, finding common ground with people. The other thing, I mean, to the first part of your question, is how are we leveraging data? As a data person, as a data scientist, rather than just giving information, I listen first. So I'm collecting data. I'm understanding what questions people have. What are their concerns? What's trending, right? And that allows me to not give these canned, robotic, polished responses. It allows me to actually respond to what people are concerned about. And I think that allows for a lot more targeted, effective messaging.
Yeah, and I think to put it kind of simply, the data is necessary for sure, provides those facts, but that storytelling is so key.
Totally.
And it makes those facts really stick with people. So, want to talk about osmosis a little bit. We are a teaching company. We love to fill knowledge gaps. And I wanted to ask you if you think there is a topic that osmosis should make a video about to fill a gap that is of particular concern or of interest to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think a million things just flooded my brain. Something that I'm getting a million questions about right now if I open up my DMs. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen the news around Tylenol and autism. I could talk about that for hours. But putting the Tylenol aside, I think really understanding the impact of fever during pregnancy, that vulnerable time period during pregnancy, the impact of environmental factors and how that impacts the health of both mother and fetus. So I think that's a hot topic right now.
For sure. That's a great suggestion. We will certainly pass that along to our content team for consideration. Kind of going back to osmosis a little bit. So, we have many students and early career health professionals in our audience. And I wanted to ask you what your advice is to them about meeting the challenges of this moment and approaching their career in healthcare.
You know, I think the biggest thing that I've had to come around to is that there's nothing I can say or put out that will resonate with every single person who's listening. So you have to understand that sometimes messages have to be tailored. What lands with one group or one individual or group of people will not land with another. And, science communication, I would say it's a science, but it's also an art. And it's something that it might not it takes a little bit of time to finesse and hone those skills, but it is so unbelievably rewarding. We talk about ROI, return on investment, and when you get messages from people and you will, that you've made a difference, or wow, no one's ever taken the time to explain it to me that way, and as a result I told this to my mother who went out and got the vaccine, whatever it is. I guess it's sorry, there was a lot there, but the impact that you can have is so very real, and this work is so worthwhile. And don't get deterred if it takes a little bit of time to figure out the style of messaging that works best for you and your audience.
So, just to play that back a little bit, messages need to be personalized or tailored. Science communication is an art, and you can have such a profound impact and to continue your journey in healthcare. Did I capture that? Okay.
So much better than I said it. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So, before we wrap up today's episode, is there anything that we didn't cover? I know we can spend a lot of time on all of these topics, but is there anything we didn't cover that maybe we should have?
I guess the only thing I'd flag is that when we talk about science communication, we often think about the skeptics and the people who we're trying to reach, right? Maybe people outside of our echo chamber. And yes, even though I'm someone who fights hard against an echo chamber, we all have echo chambers and algorithms that are serving up, right, a certain set of content. But I would also flag, and this was an unexpected thing for me, and I'm not saying this to deter anyone, but sometimes the most critical voices come from within the scientific community. That's something that I found very challenging and very, very unexpected. And the way that I get through that is I always keep my North Star is to have an impact and to reach people who aren't normally, who might not normally follow a scientific page or, have access to scientific content. And, I think that it's very easy to judge each other, but we all have different voices and perspectives and audiences. And, if you do get that criticism, of course, it's sort of the nature of science, peer review, and, we're critical of one another. But it's always best, of course, when it's delivered in a constructive way. But no matter what, just don't let it deter you.
That is really great advice. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Steier, and for all of your hard work in science communication. We truly appreciate it.
Oh gosh, thank you so much.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Dr. Steier's work reminds us that science communication isn't just about sharing facts. It's also about building trust, fostering understanding, and meeting people where they are. Whether through Unbiased Science, the Science Literacy Lab, or her broader public health efforts, Dr. Steier is helping to shape a more informed and connected future. I'm Lindsey Smith. Thanks for checking out today's show. Remember to do your part to raise the line and strengthen the healthcare system. We're all in this together.
If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes at osmosis.org/raisethelines podcast.